$4,185. That was the cheapest ticket you could buy for the final of the Football World Cup, for one seat at one single match. And the most expensive official seats climbed all the way up to $33,000. Now let's look at that very same seat 4 years earlier in Qatar. There, the cheapest ticket to the final cost 7 times less. That number comes from European fan organizations, the same groups that months later filed a complaint about these prices with the European Commission. This isn't inflation, it's a change of business model. Plenty of people want to watch this event, and this is exactly where FIFA comes in. An organization that on one hand preaches that football unites the world, and on the other runs its own ticket resale platform, taking a commission of up to 15% on every transaction. Critics add that it's charged to both sides, the one selling and the one buying. So here's the slogan, football for the world. And here's FIFA cashing in on the fact that the game has become something ordinary people can no longer afford. And that's the gentlest part of this entire story, because this isn't a film about football, or about a handful of isolated scandals. This is a case where American prosecutors reached all the way for RICO, the federal law originally written to break up organized crime. For any country on earth to host a World Cup, its government first has to sign a whole binder of guarantee documents with FIFA. From where we're all sitting, this read like dull, bureaucratic paperwork. But buried in all of that is one single line, the line where the host country agrees, quote, at its own expense, to take full responsibility for security, at the stadiums, the airports, the team hotels, the fan zones, everything in between, which means the public picks up the tab. So let's take a look at how all of this actually plays out in practice. South Africa, 2010. The country poured over $3 billion into hosting the World Cup. How much did it get back? Estimates put it at around 10%, and FIFA walked away from that very same tournament with a profit of $631 million. 4 years later, Brazil. On average, the stadiums came in about 50% over budget. Of 35 promised public transport projects, 6 were finished. The most expensive arena in the capital cost 1.6 billion reais. At the exchange rates back then, that comes out to around $700 million. And once the tournament was over, the city had to throw in another 300 million just to finish the job. Then, the latest World Cup in the USA. 11 American cities are adding up their security and logistics costs, anywhere from $100 to $200 million per city. The combined shortfall, at least $250 million. In one small town, Foxborough, a hall opened up worth nearly $8 million. One the local government flat out refused to take on. The locals called it the worst deal in history. Every single time we see the exact same pattern. The host is left holding the bill, while FIFA cashes in and drives off. How is that even possible? Well, let's start by answering one basic question. What exactly is FIFA? In the Swiss registry, FIFA is listed as an association. That's the exact same legal category as your local fishing club or chess club. A little group of people who come together around a shared hobby. Except this particular hobby happens to move billions of dollars. The scale of these hobbyists was captured best by a Brazilian, the man who ran FIFA for 24 years and turned it into a global superpower. He liked to brag that FIFA had more members than the United Nations. And he was right. FIFA brings together 211 national federations, the UN 193 countries. This association status gives FIFA a non-profit label and zero income tax in Switzerland. But the legal form is just one thing. Let's see exactly what this machine can do to the law of an entire country. Let's stay in Brazil. Brazil already had a Fan Rights Act on the books. In 2010, they added an anti-violence clause to it. No objects or drinks that could trigger violence were allowed inside the venue, which, in practice, meant a ban on alcohol in the stands. And then, in January 2012, FIFA's Secretary General walks out to face the assembled press in Rio de Janeiro. They ask him whether beer will be sold in Brazilian stadiums. He answers that alcohol is part of the World Cup. So yes, of course it will be. And he says this straight to the cameras. Excuse me if I sound a bit arrogant, but that's something we won't negotiate. And just like that, it happened. Brazil's Congress passed a special World Cup law. It didn't legalize alcohol. That would have been too obvious. What the law did was something far more subtle. Article 68 suspended those protective rules for the duration of the FIFA tournament. And why beer, of all things? Because the official beer of the World Cup was Budweiser, a brand tied to FIFA for a quarter of a century. In the end, a country suspended its own protective law for the sake of one single sponsor. And officially, of course, FIFA didn't do a thing. It was the Brazilian parliament, on its own, entirely by the book. Now let's set aside the legal codes and these unimaginable sums for a moment. In the spring of 2019, a 24-year-old kid arrives in Qatar. He has a son and he wants to send that boy to school. He's here to build one of the World Cup stadiums, putting up scaffolding to be exact. He's been promised around 1,200 reals a month, about 3 times what he'd make back in Nepal. He wanted to buy his family a small piece of land of their own. He'd show his wife the stadium over video calls. He told her that people from all over the world would come and play here, and that sometimes the scaffolding scared him. Just to land this job in the first place, he had taken out a loan to cover the recruitment agency's fees, and he couldn't simply walk away from it. Why not? To understand that, you need to know how the kafala system worked. I've covered it in earlier videos, but in short, every migrant in Qatar needed a local sponsor, their employer, and until 2020, they couldn't change jobs or even leave the country without that employer's written permission. The employer would hold on to their passport. Technically illegal, but that's exactly how it worked. One worker at a hotel that FIFA itself recommended to fans told The Guardian this, and I quote, "My friends have tried to change jobs, but our company refuses to let them go. We have to accept it. Our boss does whatever he wants." Qatar dismantled kafala in stages. Exit permits were scrapped in 2018 and 2020, and the right to change jobs without your employer's approval came with reforms in the autumn of 2020. But Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International both reported that the old practices had quietly crept right back in. So that 24-year-old man who came all the way to Qatar to work, he was no exception. This is quite simply how the entire system operates. On the 23rd of June 2019, after 2 full months on the job in the workers' camp, his roommates heard him make a strange choking sound twice. He lost consciousness and he died, 24 years old. There was no autopsy. In Qatar, they simply weren't done. Migrant deaths were closed with a single entry, natural causes. No investigation of any kind. His 27-year-old wife got 1 phone call. Company representatives called to tell her that her husband was dead, and that was the last time they ever reached out. 6 months after his death, she hadn't received a single cent. When she finally asked about it, the head of the Qatari organizing committee wrote back, full compensation, he said, was not something she was owed. The reason? Her husband had worked less than a year. In the end, she got around 7,000 reals as a gesture of goodwill. And how many cases like this were there? The answer depends on who you ask and what exactly you're asking. FIFA and the Qatari committee say 3, but that's a very narrow definition. 3 work-related deaths on the stadium construction sites alone. The head of that same committee gave a number in an interview, anywhere from 400 to 500 people, except this time he stretched it to all the infrastructure built for the World Cup. The Guardian, counting up every single worker from 5 South Asian countries, arrived at a total of 6,500. And according to official Qatari statistics, cited by Amnesty International, between 2010 and 2019, more than 15,000 foreign nationals died in Qatar. Now remember, this is everyone combined. These are not World Cup deaths. The International Labour Organization also pointed out that heat stroke on a construction site in the Qatari heat gets filed away with that same signature. Death by natural causes. The truth is, nobody knows the real scale of it. We simply cannot count it. Qatar's official position in response to all of these numbers went like this. The mortality rate among these communities falls within the expected range for the population size and demographics. In January 2022, FIFA President Gianni Infantino stands before European lawmakers and says the figure of 6,500 dead building the stadiums is, quite simply, false. The real number, according to him, is 3 people. You can agree with that or not, but it's worth remembering who's saying it. The head of the very organization that put this World Cup together. That same machine, the one that raised stadiums in a country where a man could be legally trapped in his own job, was run for years by very specific people. People the American FBI hunted down exactly the way you hunt down the mafia. Wednesday the 27th of May 2015. It's coming up on 4:30 in the morning. Zurich is still asleep. Outside the Bor Olak Hotel, one of those addresses where a single night costs as much as a month's salary, a few unmarked cars pull up. Swiss police move in, acting on an American request. There are no sirens, no doors kicked in. The officers knock on very specific rooms where the men at the very top of world football lie sleeping. They'd flown in for the FIFA Congress. The image travels around the entire world. As the officials are let out, hotel staff shield them from the lenses with white bedsheets, so their faces never reach the media. 7 men arrested, and among them, the man who ran football for all of North and Central America. That very same morning, agents walk into his federation's headquarters in Miami with a search warrant. The American Department of Justice reached for a law written to break up organized crime, the very same one used to bring down Italian-American mafia families. An indictment appears, 47 charges, 14 defendants. A scheme that ran for 24 years and covered more than $150 million in bribes. But at this point, all of it is still just on paper. This isn't a court verdict. So until someone confesses or gets convicted, they are presumed innocent, except that a few of these men did confess. A Brazilian TV rights broker handed the state back more than $150 million, and the former head of the Brazilian Federation got a lifetime ban from football, from FIFA itself. That's a disciplinary sanction from the ethics committee, not a criminal verdict. But the organization itself decided he'd taken bribes. This machine was older than it looks. And to see where it all came from, we have to go all the way back to the year 1974. At a congress in Frankfurt, a Brazilian, João Havelange, wins the election for FIFA president. He beats an old European official on the votes of Africa and Asia, the ones he'd promised money and more spots at the World Cup. He won on promises, and those promises had to be paid for somehow. And that's when Havelange sits down with Horst Dassler, the son of Adidas's founder, the man who was first to understand that sport could be sold like any other product. Dassler financed Havelange's campaign, and not long after, he founded a company called ISL. FIFA handed it a monopoly on all its marketing and TV rights for decades to come. And the model here was a simple one. FIFA sold the rights to ISL for less than they were worth. ISL sold them on at the real market price. And part of that difference came flowing back through shell companies and foundations in Liechtenstein as private commissions, into the secret accounts of the very people who decided who got those rights. In 2001, ISL goes bankrupt, with debts running to some $300 million, and only then, when someone finally had to comb through its books, did the world see just how much had been quietly leaking out of that company for years. A Swiss court later worked out that ISL had handed officials 138 million francs in bribes, but we're talking here about the whole world of sport, not FIFA alone. In 1998, the wheel of this machine, already up to speed and swimming in money, passes to Sepp Blatter. He didn't dream it up, he just inherited it, ready-made. And here, let's come back to those men shielded by bedsheets as the police let them out. That raid would never have happened if it weren't for one single man. His name was Chuck Blazer. An American at the very top of FIFA, renting himself apartments in New York's Trump Tower. He flew wherever he pleased and spent millions on the Federation's company card. The problem was, for years, Blazer paid no taxes and hid his foreign accounts. When the American tax authorities and the FBI pieced it all together, they had him, and they made him their offer. Either you cooperate, or you go to prison. As you can probably guess, Blazer chose to cooperate, from at least the end of 2011. He was walking into meetings with these officials as a secret informant. The story goes that at the London Olympics in 2012, he recorded his colleagues on a microphone hidden inside a keychain. Media all over the world described it, but it never showed up in court, so let's treat it as press legend, not as fact. Besides, what's actually in the case files is far, far stronger. On the 25th of November 2013, at a secret session of the federal court in Brooklyn, Blazer reads his own guilty plea out loud. He says, among other things, I agreed with others, around 1992, to facilitate the acceptance of a bribe. He goes on to admit that for years he took money for decisions, among them the choice of South Africa as host of the 2010 World Cup. 10 charges. The court accepted his guilt on all 10 of them. And now, let's look at something that sounds like a joke, but really isn't. In the lawsuit the Federation filed against Blazer in 2017, they laid out what the company money went on. And there it was, A separate apartment in Trump Tower, running about $6,000 a month, which, as they carefully put it, was supposedly for Blazer's cats. Chuck Blazer died in 2017, before any verdict was ever handed down. And here's the part that's genuinely hard to believe, because once the dust from that whole raid had settled, FIFA, the very organization whose officials had spent years taking bribes, went to an American court asking for victim status and for compensation. From a legal standpoint, you can actually defend it, because in the indictment, FIFA is the organization those officials were meant to corrupt from within. So formally, it's the victim. It's just that the same victim lived off the whole racket for years and did nothing about it, until outside prosecutors finally showed up. In this whole machine, there were also people who tried to speak up about what was going on, and look what happened to them. Bonita Mercedes ran communications for the Australian committee bidding for the 2022 World Cup. She saw the mechanism from the inside. How exactly you go about buying an official's goodwill through so-called development projects and outside consultants. And when she first started pushing back against all of it in January 2010, she lost her job. After the scandal, FIFA did something meant to show it would police its own house. It handed the whole investigation over to an outsider, a former American federal prosecutor named Michael Garcia. When Garcia got to Bonita and compared her account with the documents, a lot of what she'd said checked out. The second woman, though, had it worse. She handled media for the Qatari committee, and she too left in early 2010. Then she passed what she knew to journalists, to the British Parliament, and to outside investigators. When her identity came out, the threats began, against her and against her children. She said just one sentence back then, that for the rest of her life she'd be looking over her shoulder. And after 2014, she basically vanished from public life. Now Garcia went on to confirm part of what she had actually said, that Qatar really had signed a sponsorship deal with the African Confederation worth nearly $2 million and that the transfer itself went through. But her single strongest claim, that $1.5 million each was handed to specific African officials in hotel rooms over in Angola, that was the one thing he simply couldn't confirm. There's no evidence for it, so we don't know how it really went. After all of this, FIFA announced it was bringing in a new order, ending the old era. And here's the question that comes up. Who exactly was supposed to keep watch over it? The 26th of February 2016, Zurich, the Congress Hall, 9 months earlier, those officials were being let out under bedsheets. And now, FIFA is electing a new president. The hall is completely packed, the cameras are all set up, and the results of each voting round keep flashing up on the board. And the winner is Gianni Infantino, a lawyer. Since the year 2000, he had worked over at UEFA's own headquarters in Nyon, and from 2009 he served as its Secretary General. So in short, this is a man who had spent his entire working life inside this very same industry. He didn't come in from the outside to clean house. It would be closer to say he came from the office next door. 4 months earlier, in October 2015, UEFA had unanimously backed his candidacy. And that's an important little detail. Infantino didn't win as some rebel against the system. He won as someone who knew the system from the inside and promised that was exactly why he'd fix it. After everything that had happened, that sounded reasonable. It actually sounded like the only way out. From the stage, he says a line that would come back in every press piece for years to come. Let's bring football back to FIFA and FIFA back to football. A new era begins. FIFA itself announces how much its new president earns, $1.5 million francs a year without a single bonus, plus 2,000 francs a month for expenses. After an era where no outsider knew who in that building earned what, it was a demonstration of transparency and, however it sounds, of modesty. As I mentioned already, FIFA isn't a private company. It has no owners, no shareholders, nobody who can pay themselves a profit. The entire surplus has to go back to the 211 national football associations around the world. Every one of them, even a federation that will never once play in a World Cup, gets up to $8 million from Zurich over 4 years. Even Poland's own federation benefits from this. Pitches, equipment, coaches. Where a private company won't invest because it sees no profit in it, someone has to pay, and FIFA does. But here you have to ask a completely different question, because FIFA tells you what it does with the money it earns, but who pays so that they can earn it in the first place? In the end, it's the taxpayers, which means all of us. When someone says FIFA takes all the cash for itself, that's the easiest charge to knock down. FIFA does it with a single annual report. The mechanism works differently. There is no other World Cup. If you want to host one, put it on television, or simply take part in it, you have to come to FIFA. They set the terms. In May 2016, barely 3 months after announcing this new era, FIFA passes a change to its own rules. The Council gets the power to remove the heads of the independent committees, which means they can fire the watchdogs. A year later, the heads of the 2 chambers of the Ethics Committee, the very same ones who ran the investigations after the Zurich raid, don't get their mandates renewed. And on that same occasion, out goes the head of the committee that was supposed to guard how the organization operated. In 2017, FIFA set up its own panel of independent human rights experts. They were meant to keep an eye on the organization over Qatar. In March 2021, the Council published a closing report, and its 4-year mandate came to an end. No new one was ever named. A year and a half before a World Cup, in a country at the center of the fiercest human rights fight in the entire history of this event, they promised a great reform. And then, one by one, the people meant to carry it out simply disappeared. Miguel Maduro, the one removed from the committee that guarded the rules, later said, now from the outside, that the culture inside FIFA hadn't changed at all. The votes are always unanimous, and the incumbents will always win the elections. December of 2025, Washington, D.C., the evening of the group stage draw for the 2026 World Cup. During that whole evening, Infantino personally hands Donald Trump the very first ever FIFA Peace Prize. Football unites the world. And now, what was missing here? No candidates were ever announced beforehand. Nobody said who did the choosing. No rules were shown, no makeup of any committee. French journalists later established that the prize was dreamed up and awarded by fewer than 10 people inside FIFA. Not one of the 37 council members was ever asked about it. The day before, in Washington, the presidents of Congo and Rwanda signed the next stage of a peace deal, with Trump taking part. Infantino had already lobbied publicly for the American president to get the Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't get the Nobel, but they did arrange him a peace prize from FIFA instead. The questions started even before the ceremony. On the 11th of November, Human Rights Watch sent FIFA a list of questions. What are the criteria? Who nominates? Who judges? And who are the jurors? They set the deadline for a reply at the 20th of November. They never got a reply. The 8th of December, a human rights organization called Fair Square files a formal complaint over the whole thing. A complaint against the president of FIFA to their ethics committee. The very same one whose 2 heads were pushed out of their posts 8 years earlier. On the 29th of June this year, 50 members of the European Parliament sent a letter to Zurich backing that complaint. That's all they can do. Send a letter to a private Swiss association. The 1st of July 2026, the match between the United States and Bosnia and Herzegovina. The American striker gets a red card for a foul. He walks off the pitch immediately. This penalty is automatic and normally there's no overturning it. But after the match, Donald Trump calls the president of FIFA, asking for the penalty to be reversed. People from his administration bring in lawyers to help the American Federation file an appeal the rules don't even allow for. The 5th of July, FIFA's disciplinary committee reaches for Article 27 of its own code and suspends the penalty for a 1-year probation. The penalty stays. It's just that, in practice, you don't have to serve it. The striker plays in the next match against Belgium. For the second time in World Cup history, a player walks back onto the pitch after being sent off. And now, the detail that says more than all the rest. The British Times established that a decision like this is normally made by 3 committee members. In this case, it was made by 1. That same day, UEFA puts out a statement. The decision is, quote, unprecedented, incomprehensible, and impossible to justify. 3 days later, 72 members of the European Parliament from 13 countries sign a letter to the heads of the national football federations, so that they would be the ones pressing FIFA's ethics committee. The American striker played in the match against Belgium. The United States lost 1-4. This isn't a story about Trump. You can like him or not. But FIFA just showed it's an organization where one phone call is enough to make a penalty disappear. And here, someone might say that's just how every big sports organization works. Nothing ever changes, and that's simply the charm of this world. Let's go back a quarter of a century to a different sport. The 24th of November 1998, Salt Lake City in the state of Utah. A local television station, not a national one, a local one, reveals a letter. It shows that the committee bidding for the 2002 Winter Olympics had funded a scholarship for the daughter of one member of the International Olympic Committee. A month later, a Swiss man speaks up, tied to that committee for years. A man who had written the ethics rules for the organization himself says publicly what everyone on the inside already knew, that votes get bought. And he adds that this isn't only about Salt Lake City, this wasn't the scale of FIFA. We're not talking hundreds of millions here. American prosecutors counted up around $1 million in total in benefits for a dozen or so committee members. Scholarships, trips, medical care, and jobs for relatives. January 1999. An internal investigation demands that 6 members be thrown out. 3 more leave on their own, not even waiting for the outcome. Then March, 6 of them are gone, and in comes the whole American justice system and Congress too. Then December, the committee goes and changes its own rules. An ethics committee is created. Age and term limits are finally brought in. Athletes get a real vote, and members are now banned from visiting any of the cities bidding for the games. From that very first leak on local TV to an actual change in the rules, just 13 months. And just so it's not all quite so rosy, this story has another side to it as well. Because back in July of the year 2000, American prosecutors brought charges against 2 of the heads of the committee, 15 separate counts, including paying money to influence votes. And 3 years later, a judge acquitted them both. But let's take note of this. An institution can clean itself up without waiting for a verdict. All it has to do is want to. That investigation inside the Olympic Committee was run by Dick Pound. He threw out colleagues from an organization where he himself was a vice president. He said FIFA was a far more serious matter: money laundering, corruption, and criminal charges. The 21st of December 2023, Luxembourg. The Grand Chamber of the Court of Justice of the European Union hands down its ruling in the Super League case. FIFA and UEFA are, at one and the same time, the organizer of the competitions and the one who decides whether anyone else may create any competition for them. Now, the court said that such an arrangement isn't actually banned, but if the rules for admission aren't fully transparent and they discriminate against someone, then that becomes an abuse of a dominant market position. And from that moment, something begins that wasn't there before. March of this year, European fan and consumer organizations file a complaint with the European Commission. They point to 6 specific abuses in the way tickets are sold. May the attorneys general of 2 American states, New York and New Jersey, sent FIFA a formal demand over ticket prices. On the 13th of July, a court in Frankfurt bans FIFA from selling tickets without revealing who's actually selling them. It orders the identity and address of commercial sellers to be given before the buyer pays. It also bans advertising prices starting from if there are no tickets at that price at all. The ruling itself isn't public, but according to reports, breaking the ban carries €250,000 in fines or 6 months in custody, by name, against the president of FIFA and the secretary general. These are temporary measures, and they only apply in Germany. FIFA didn't even show up in court, but that changed nothing, and this is no longer a letter politely asking for an explanation. It's a court order. And in all of this, we still have one thing left. Remember that pay FIFA laid out so openly? €1.5 million francs and 0 bonus back in 2016. In the report for 2024, the FIFA president's salary is already $2.5 million, plus a bonus of $1.5 million. In the report for 2025, we're back to $2.5 million in base pay, but now over $2 million in bonuses. Nobody hid any of it. It's all in the documents FIFA publishes itself. As part of the transparency, it announced back in 2016 that Peace Prize, the FIFA president handed Trump in December. To this day, there's nobody who answers for it. FIFA never answered Human Rights Watch's questions. The only thing it said publicly was a spokesman's statement defending the prize, with no criteria and no person who did the choosing. Between October 2025 and April of this year, FIFA raised the prices on 90 of the tournament's 104 matches, on average by 33%. From selling entry, ordinary tickets and those pricey packages with a box and full service, This World Cup was meant to bring in around $3 billion, roughly a third of everything the tournament will earn. That's FIFA's own forecast. A year earlier though, the same mechanism worked in the other direction. FIFA held a different tournament in the States back then, not of national teams, but of clubs. A kind of dress rehearsal before the World Cup, on the very same stadiums. The semi-final, a ticket that started out at $473, drops to 13 days before the match. And the stands would have been empty anyway, so what did the organizers do about it? They sent volunteers free tickets with a request not to wear FIFA shirts, so they'd look like ordinary fans. I'm not a football fan, so I won't judge it. But getting ready for this film, I came across the view that there's less and less sport and fighting spirit in all of this, and more calculation. Fan organizations wrote that this World Cup is a betrayal. If you follow football, is that really how it looked from your perspective? Let me know in the comments, and I thank you for today. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Over $50,000, that's what a single night can cost in a famous Dubai hotel. Golden door handles, Italian marble, and a pool spilling right over the edge of the roof. This image is sold to us as a dream come true, but there's a country building its city from scratch, without the excess of skyscrapers, in harmony with nature. Click the thumbnail and see how the exact opposite of Dubai gets built. This is called Lemon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in just a moment.